Hi, I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment and music education. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow.
This was such a fun interview. We got to talk to Heather Fortune, who I've actually been following on social media for a little while. I've seen some of her work through F-Flat, and it was just really interesting to get her perspective on, what we can be doing in our music classes a little differently.
Yeah, the opportunities that she has for her students are so unique and just, I don't know, they're just really fun, right? Mm-hmm. And set the kids up for being nice, lifelong musicians, which is such a wonderful thing.
Yep, always our goal. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're so glad that you're here, and we're really excited to be talking to today's guest, Heather Fortune. I was lucky to get introduced to Heather through F-Flat Books and also some social media connections and things like that. So we're really excited to talk to her today. So hi, Heather, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So before we kind of dive in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your current teaching situation?
Sure, yeah. So I am a flutist by training. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in flute performance from Boston University. And I was a full-time freelancing musician for about 10 years here in Philadelphia, where I live. And then I guess prior to moving to Philly, I had been for 1 year, I had taken a job as like a traditional band director in the Atlanta suburbs, and it wasn't a great fit. Kind of tried it, didn't work, came back up here and just played various kinds of gigs and lots of weddings, lots of orchestra things, chamber orchestra things, opera things, putting my own stuff together and being contracted by local groups and all of that. And then I was able to become the flute teacher at a Quaker school right in the city. And I did that for about 4 years, teaching flute lessons after school at this Quaker school. And it just like the culture of a Quaker school really struck me. I was a public school kid my whole life. And something different was happening in this school. And when the full-time instrumental music job became open, I applied and I got it. And I've been there for about 16 years as the full-time music teacher doing middle and upper school, which is what we call high school, instrumental music. One thing that's always been really important to me is as I became a teacher, it really was a process of becoming. I started out, with a pretty busy freelance schedule, and I didn't want to let go of that work. And so those early years in particular, balancing the freelance work with the teaching work was kind of one of my main things that I had to figure out. And I've worked pretty hard over the years to keep that one foot in the performing world. And even though more and more of my brain space has been overtaken by the joys and challenges of teaching instrumental music.
Yeah, I'm sure that really benefits the students, though, to see you as an active performing musician and seeing how that fits into your life.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we had fun looking and reading your book, and there was one quote, if you don't mind me saying from your book, that really kind of struck us, and wondered if you would kind of share a little bit more about it. So the part we really enjoyed was this: after spending over a decade of a full-time performer, as you've been talking about recently here, I found collaborating with students in the classroom deeply satisfying. For me, it was far more rewarding than conducting a traditional band and quite different than playing classical flute. Those activities are essentially replicative, while this mode of teaching is generative. It is rooted in both dialogue and creativity, and it is truly the only way I would want to teach. So that's so wonderful. Can you dive into that a little bit more deeply?
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. So I guess my first year teaching, I had come on the heels of another teacher who was very young and had kind of he had breathed life back into this instrumental music program. It had been truly gone, and for 2 years he brought it back to life from nothing, and he moved on, and he was like a young cool guy, and when he left, over half the students in the program quit, and it's a small school,
Mhm.
so those numbers are significant. So when I began, my high school group was like 7 students, and it was, if I can remember, let's see, there was clarinet, there was violin, viola, bass, drums, and then a kid who played guitar and saxophone, and then another guitar player. And I just was kind of like, okay, how are we going to make this work? And so from day one of the teaching job, there was never a moment when I could say, oh, here's a piece for this crowd. Here's something I know that we can do, and I'm going to hand out, and we'll just get going. So from day one, it really became like, well, what do you all want to play? What do you want to learn? What do you want to do? And having multi instrumentalists in the group, having kids, and I think this is pretty common in most music programs, kids who might play a band or an orchestra instrument, but then go play in a rock band and maybe pick up a guitar, bass, or drums, sort of allowing all of that musicianship into the classroom from day one kind of created all of these really cool possibilities. And so, I had no choice but to arrange music for the group, and to really draw out from them what it was that they wanted to do. And so, although it was challenging, not having ever studied that stuff and not ever having really used those tech tools and like having to truly start from the ground up, it was really rewarding to be able to bring something into class and say like, well, let's try this, and how did this go? And this part doesn't seem to be working really well, but this other thing actually landed better than we thought it would, and how can we change it? And kind of like back to the drawing board a lot, for me as a teacher between rehearsals, and it was really fun. And I would also say in the performing world, in the classical music freelance scene, for example, and to a certain extent in the professional scene of people with orchestra jobs, you have all this expertise and you have all this craft and you have all this mastery, but claiming agency in that job is quite tricky. You don't always have agency. And here I found myself in the classroom really working with agency. I was really supported by the administration to try whatever I wanted to. And the kids, by and large, are well behaved private school kids, and they were kind of willing to go with me when I tried stuff and, let me know when things weren't landing. And it all was sort of done within this very respectful dialogue where I was respecting the student's agency and I was also given my own agency. And so I think that the experience of like autonomy and agency in this role really took me by surprise. I hadn't had that when I was a band director in Georgia for a year. It was part of the turnoff of that job. Although I worked with lovely people, I didn't like the repertoire, and I wasn't presented with much choice in the matter because this is what the band repertoire is and this is what the grade level of the group is and here's what we're trying to do with our festival scores, and all of those kind of constraints kind of left me feeling like I was supposed to replicate this system that I had actually been trained in myself. And so kind of being given a chance to create something new from the ground up was just wildly inspiring.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No.
Very much. I love how you, just even going back a little bit, you were talking about, oh, well, I had a student who played this and this and this. And I feel like often in the conversation, we'll hear someone say, oh, well, a student's transferring into my program and they play blank instrument that's not in my program. What do I do? You switch them to something else. And that's the immediate response is, oh, switch them to this. You have a string player in your band, switch them to oboe. You have a guitar player, give them. But you didn't say, oh, let's quick figure out how we can make this instrumentation match an ensemble that I am familiar with. You said, okay, let's figure it out. And I think that's an important message.
Yeah. Like, who's here? What do we want to do? Yeah. I mean, it just felt really organic. It felt really like, the students that stayed in that class that year were the students that wanted to play. Mm-hmm. So that was an advantage. Like the most motivated kids were there. And like, that's beautiful to meet teenagers that are motivated like that. And so kind of honoring where they were coming from and figuring out what it was that they wanted to do felt like a natural way to begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the last sentence of the, teaching is rooted in the dialogue and the creativity, and it's truly the only way you want to teach. Like it really highlights it's hard work, but it's so rewarding, and it's because it's just, you're creating something and you're creating something with the kids. And it's, you don't know necessarily where it's all going to go, but that's the exciting part of the journey. So,
yeah. I mean, the thing that I came upon was, all right, well, I'll arrange something. And then it's like, well, that's just how I have to do it now, because I've never really fleshed out a traditional instrumentation. And I think for me, the discovery was, wait, I really enjoy arranging music, and I really enjoy kind of the process. Like this time of year in the summer, while we're speaking, I'm kind of like letting my mind wander and waiting for inspiration to strike so that I, get excited about something, and I imagine who's going to be in the group and how it could work. And I kind of start filling in the pieces as part of my own initial inspiration. Like, oh, we've got a really awesome string section this year. Like, oh, we've got a clarinet player that wants to play hard parts. Or, oh, we've got a huge percussion section this year, and I can feel how that would work and see it in my mind's eye. And so that the arranging piece became a new skill that I devoted myself to learning, and just in a really functional way. Like, all right, we've got a concert in December, we've got a concert in May, we're going to have to get some stuff ready. And so, learning notation software, dissecting scores in ways that related to how I'd been taught during my, my college years, but kind of for a new purpose. Just again, got to that generative piece where it's not like I don't often compose. I've composed a few pieces for my students for sure, but that's not my main action. It's sort of like these arrangements as a way to kind of get the whole group doing something that's going to be satisfying for everybody.
Yeah. And it's neat to hear. Sense. Oh, 100%. There's so many light bulbs are going off as you're talking. It was neat to hear you talk about having agency as a teacher. A lot of times we talk here about, giving agency to the students, but I think it sounds like you recognized that agency in yourself, and now as a result are giving that to your students as well. Did I understand that correctly? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, I was trained in a very traditional program by a very well thought of, well regarded band director who was good at a lot of things, and certainly lots and lots of people came out of the programs that I was in that went on to do this as their job, which is amazing. But it was very, I'll just say it, patriarchal. It was very top down. It was very boys club, and it was very like, come on over here and hang with the boys. And when I got sort of my own classroom and got to kind of like problem solve in my own space, it kind of helped me reflect on like, I didn't have a ton of agency when I was a student. I sort of did what I was told, and I took the auditions I was told I would take, and I, proceeded up the ladder as I was able to. And I didn't think about it. I didn't really question those structures. And being in a classroom of 7 kids who were motivated, but at very different levels, like I just started to see the way in which each of them had something that they brought that was special and wonderful and was going to make some aspect of one of our pieces really work. And so trying to help those students engage fully in the work of rehearsal so that they could bring that light into our performance and bring their best selves really tapped me quickly into their sense of having agency. So that if a student came and said, this part kind of sucks, and I think this is a really clumsy way to write this, and I think we rewrote it that way, it would be a lot easier to play and it would sound a lot better, I'd go, yeah, you're right. And, this is like the second guitar I've ever written. So like, it's so helpful for me to hear that from you. Thank you. Can you show me more about what you're saying? Like, show me on the instrument what I wrote and why it doesn't work. Oh, I get that. So like learning from them at the same time as I'm asking them to learn from me, I think really helped kind of center that sense of agency all around.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great model for you, showing how, like, I don't want to say make mistakes, because we wouldn't call, a part written differently a mistake, but you're showing you're showing, what's the word I'm looking for? Like iteration, and you're showing how feedback can inform like future versions of things. And like, that's an important part of this musical process. It's not, here it is, we do it, we're done. It's, we take this thing, we continue to mold and meld and just change, and eventually it turns into something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And sort of moving away from the model of like, I'm standing at the front of the room and I've got all the answers and you'll play for me and I'll tell you if it was good or bad. But moving more into the like, I mean, I think one of the things that having the performance degree affords me, and I strongly advocate for people who are in performance worlds and for who have performance degrees to really think about teaching as a way to expand their skill set. But one of the things that gave me was a sense of like, yes, give you feedback when that's the role I'm in, but also to learn from you. Like, I know that I can learn. That's one of the things that having that performance degree helped me learn about myself. Like, I can learn stuff, and there's not a fixed amount of learning that I will then take with me into my professional life. This is a process that I will now undergo for the rest of my life if I'm lucky. And so kind of showing that's the mode of teaching and learning in the music room kind of felt natural, but also perhaps a little bit revolutionary. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because so often we expect that the person on the podium is the expert. They've achieved that level and, you know, they're there, but you're saying that no, we can all continue learning, and that everyone in the room is learning together. Yeah, that's an important concept.
And so, yeah, so like where I am now, the high school ensemble is usually about 40 students, which is tremendous. In a high school of about 200 total students, it feels really like spot on. There are always other kids in the student body that play that for one reason or another just don't take the class. And I don't chase them around and hound them unless they play the accordion, in which case I'm like, please come play the accordion in our ensemble. That's an awesome instrument. But we have this full, large group music making. And at this point, I've learned how to help the group sound really good most of the time. But we're not chasing festival scores. We don't fit any categories. We actually can't attend a lot of the festivals because we don't fit into the box of band, orchestra, or now modern band. But it's community building through music making. And I feel like there's a very respectful quality to what happens in the music room. It's really clear when there are beginners, because I say like, let's everybody cheer on Susie. She decided to learn guitar this year. She's a brand new beginner. Isn't that amazing? And then in December, when Susie's like nailing an exposed solo part, I can lift that up. And, everybody can also hear when there's a student that's just like a hot player. Just like we all can hear, like everyone hears it. And like, one of the things I like about doing arrangements for the group is that when we want to do something ambitious, we can kind of draw on the different strengths in the room to execute those ambitious things. So I'll often have a piano player or two that can play kind of anything that you write down. And when we're playing things that have wacky modulations or really crazy transitions, that is a wonderful opportunity for those kids to have a solo that makes everything work for everyone. So, over the years, I've gotten really comfortable at sort of making visible these differences in skill level, and making that like, that's not the most important thing in the class, your skill level. That's another kind of critique I think I respond to when I think about my own training. Skill level was a proxy for all kinds of things in classical music training. And sometimes a really, really skilled player would be a really, really terrible person to hang out with and talk to. And that dissonance always kind of struck me. And, we're sort of like elevating people based on skill level alone. And I think we're missing some things when we do that. And so kind of enacting a different kind of value structure in the classroom for me felt very natural and felt very important. And again, as a gift, given that I walked into a situation where I was told, do anything that you want to, let's see if it works.
I was going to say a byproduct of that, though, is like, I'm a kid in your ensemble and I feel seen, and not just because, or, I'm not going to be seen only because I'm the best clarinet player, but like, because I'm trying a new instrument, or I chipped in and I'm, trying to help help you, rearrange a part of a piece or something. Like it's just, it doesn't have, I was seen for my efforts, and that's really would make me want to stay in your band,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Ensemble, not a band, not a band.
Ensemble.
I need a better name.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But no, ensemble's perfect, right? Group of humans making music.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So we've built, and so I teach in the middle school, and we have we call them orchestra in the middle school, pretty standard. In our school, we have a string program that, in our third and fourth grade, our students can choose between a string program and an ORF program. And then in middle school, it's kind of, split between the fifth and sixth graders and the seventh and eighth graders, and each of them perform as a standalone ensemble. And then in high school, students join ensemble and they get 2 classes for the price of 1. And this is a structure I've come upon. I'm facing a little pressure to consider breaking it up, and I'm resisting that pressure. So students in the high school join the full ensemble, and they also, as part of that group, are in a small ensemble. So there's like a pull-out. If we have 3 rehearsals a week, once a week they're doing the small group. And the choices are chamber orchestra, because there are always kids that just want to play classical music or feel most comfortable doing that and love doing it. And our strings teacher takes that on. Some kids choose percussion ensemble, which is taught by the percussion teacher who has percussion ensembles in the middle school. And that tends to be either new composed or, again, arrangements of cover, pop stuff, or kind of abstract modern stuff that you would think of as more connected to like contemporary classical music. And then I coach the lab band, which we run like a rock band. And so that's for kids that just want to play rock music. And what's cool is that this year we had we had a violinist and a saxophone player join the percussion ensemble because they wanted to do that. We had a violinist decide to learn how to play drums in the rock band. A trumpet player, similar, decided to play drums in the rock band. Somebody decided to try singing, which, I'm not the choir teacher, and that was really cool. And I find that with this dual structure in the high school, the musicianship that's built is kind of like synergistic between all the groups. So as I face some pressure to launch the rock band as its own class and to launch the percussion ensemble as its own class and the chamber orchestra, I'm afraid of breaking this magic in a certain way, like diluting the musicianship, because I think everything that's going on in that percussion ensemble is feeding what we're doing in large ensemble. Mm-hmm. And everything that we're doing in large ensemble is feeding what's happening in the chamber ensemble. And I'm trying to really, in a patient way, keep explaining the value of the 2-for-1 class structure for our high school instrumental students. Because I do think it's something a little bit unique, and I see a lot of risk taking within the dual structure, which is something that I'm thrilled and is something I'm trying to cultivate in my students.
Yeah. What a great opportunity. And the fact that they're so diverse, those like pull out ensembles, that you're really getting kids a chance to try things. I mean, and are they, I don't want to say stuck with what they pick one year, or can they try something different the next year?
Oh, they can. We let them change. Well, I've been pretty liberal about letting them change, kind of like, oh, you want to join us for a piece, but that's not like a sustainable rehearsal model. So we ask them to commit for a semester. And so they can try half year in percussion ensemble, half year in rock band, go back to chamber orchestra the next year if that feels comfortable. Maybe they finally get to senior year and say like, I always wanted to try the drums, and they, make a different choice. Yeah. So the emphasis is on trying different things.
So can you tell us more about technology? How is that benefiting the kids?
Absolutely, yes. So when I arrange scores, I have everything that we're playing in XML format, which is the universal file format for notation software. So my group sounded pretty good, and then they started to sound really amazing when I would take those XML files and upload them to like a Flat.io or a Noteflight and distribute that as the practice part. I did experiment with like smart music first, these AI-driven tools that are meant to give students feedback, and they universally frustrated my students to no end. My best players who knew they were nailing their part with everything set to be as lenient as possible were still getting coded red all over the place, and they got mad and they stopped playing. They stopped practicing. So I find that these XML based practice parts, to give a student, the score on flat, to have them solo their own part, learn it at their own pace, hear what it's supposed to sound like, be their own judge of if they're hitting the mark. mix in their neighbor's part to understand that interaction, mix in the whole group when they're ready. I just found that that took the musicianship of my groups up a million notches. And bonus for any kid that doesn't read notation, that's how they're learning their part. They're learning it by ear. And that's completely fine with me, completely fine. Another tool I love, and I don't work for them, but Sight Reading Factory, I discovered as the pandemic landed. And for kids that don't read, they can do rhythm only exercises. For kids that are on fretted instruments, right now there is no tab on sightreadingfactory.com, but they can start to sort of set up custom exercises to learn how to read the notes on their open strings if that's what they want to do. I just have those as like weekly assignments, very low stakes, and all of the kids have improved with that. Being able to record a quick video playing submission, and for me to like use something like Flipgrid to give feedback, or more effectively for students to give each other feedback on Flipgrid, absolutely took the playing to another level. It was fine when students thought they were going to play for me to give feedback, but when they know they're performing for each other, boy, do they practice and get ready for that. And boy, do they take the act of giving feedback seriously. So those are some ways where I sort of saw that this idea of arranging for the groups, having all of the scores in, my preferred notation tool right now is Sibelius. It has been forever. I would love to learn Dorico. I don't have that bandwidth right now. But, getting everything just so in Sibelius, having a student then maybe not thrive on the part and being able to say, like, I can see this isn't working for you. Let's change it. And being able to just change it and then send out a new sound file or whatever, post a new sound file. The other thing I love is something I started doing about 5 years ago is I will sometimes create for a student who is maybe more at the beginner level. I'll create a baseline part and then I'll create a challenge part. And I won't say like, if you're really good, you can play the challenge part. I'll just sort of say like, hey, let's look at some patterning here. That 8-bar phrase in the challenge part only has a couple differences from your baseline part. So maybe you could go for those 8 bars up on the challenge line. Oh, that worked out pretty well. Well, look, it's almost the same thing again down here with a slightly different ending. And so kind of giving kids like multiple pathways to navigate challenge and taking on challenge, or even ramping down challenge if that's appropriate. Again, like sort of in a neutral way so that they're truly making these choices. They can make a different choice every rehearsal. Those things have really upped the musicianship of my players. I will say that at the first couple of years, it was hard to figure out how to really keep everyone on this continually upward skill track. And when you have an XML score and you have these tools at your disposal to manipulate that material, it's like a power up. They all have improved. And then the last thing I'll say is I haven't talked much about creative projects, but we do always fold creative projects into our ensemble work. It's a really important facet of what we do. And so something that's really easy, if you have your score in XML, you can take a 16-bar phrase, throw it into flat, take either the melody or the bass line or the chords or some aspect of it away, and invite students to rewrite those bits. And something I also love is like we use flat and Soundtrap. So you can quickly send it over to Soundtrap. And I say, like, if you prefer to work in the DAW in Soundtrap, the digital audio workstation, go for it. If you prefer to work in flat in the notation software platform, go for it. If you want to start in one and end in the other and bounce it back and forth, go for it. And I have students take me up on all of those choices. So the way that technology has transformed what we do is just, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. What amazing like opportunities the kids are getting between having the choices, the scaffolding, the different levels of things. And even just when you were talking about letting them open up the score in something like flat, you're giving, okay, I'm going to the band world. You're giving the third clarinet player who used to only kind of sort of know what the harmony was, the opportunity to see the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So often in like band and orchestra, the kids are stuck. They see their part and they have no idea what's going on around them. But now they have access. Like I remember when my students in middle school, they would sneak up on the podium and like look at my score and their eyes would get really big. Like, all that's happening. Like, yeah, totally. It's all happening. But they can see.
And absolutely. Score say. So you can give a listening journal assignment, say, okay, listen to 3 parts that are not your own. And make 3 observations about each part that were surprising to you. And then they're listening in a new way. I mean, to me, again, from the performer mindset, I'm constantly trying to keep my ears on an upward trajectory. I'm constantly trying to hear more in the music that I'm playing. I'm constantly trying to hear how I can be better as with my own articulation as a flutist, right? Like there's this ear is guiding what you're doing. And the more I can center that activity for my students, like if your chops are centered in your ears, the better they can do. And I think technology has really leveled the playing field for a lot of those kinds of activities.
That's awesome. I mean, everything you're saying, they're clear benefits, right? But if you had to like sum it up, so thinking about, this model that you have versus maybe a traditional model that you experienced growing up or when you were teaching, for that 1 year, what would you say the benefits are to the students by trying these different things, being innovative, giving them more agency in the process?
I mean, I sort of talk about this in the book, the sort of 5 pillars of my philosophy, but the biggest one I think is fearless, not flawless. I mean, they learn that mistakes are part of the process and that sometimes they happen and we try not to make them, but like, oh, okay. But that music belongs to you and you get this for the rest of your life and you can try different things throughout the course of your life. I mean, another sort of big picture circumstance that I think I'm trying to counteract is how many people do we know that played in really good orchestra and band programs or sang in really good choirs all the way through school, maybe even into college, and then that huge structure, which is maintained by a whole administrative task force, is missing from their life, and they stop making music. They become passive sort of music. Their interaction with music becomes more passive as listeners, maybe as concert goers. And, I want the students in my room to, be in bands with their friends, to play chamber music with their friends, to buy concert tickets because they've played some of these pieces, to go hear the orchestra play Scheherazade. They remember when they played xylophone on it when they were in the 10th grade, to really let these connections live well beyond the class time that we spend together. So if I had to boil it down to one thing, I would say fearless, not flawless, is my main objective.
Yeah. And I think for me, I just kind of got in a deeper level why the 2-for-1 model that you were talking about before helps that. Because if I'm brave enough to like mid-semester just move and try percussion that I've never done before, and I'm going to perform a piece and be a part of an ensemble, like that's a big risk, or like you said, someone's going to like just start taking up guitar, but like they, you feel the responsibility of doing your best for the group. And yet you're going to take this step and try something you haven't done before or whatever. I think that helps develop, that for them moving forward, like, yeah, I could be in a garage band, or, I could join or sing at, at a temple or a church or something, because I have that in me. I did that in high school. So yeah, that's really cool.
I also think a lot about how like the wind band, like true confession, I played in really good bands when I was in high school. I did not love the repertoire, but I just sort of accepted it. And when I think now, that's not the music that animates me. Like when I was in high school and joined youth orchestra, that music animated me. And so for me, the sort of orchestral repertoire is what really lit the fire. And I know that in a lot of places, the band exists in the school, but we've lost this, like, where does a band live authentically within a community, right? Like if you're not in the military, if there's no military base, if there's no, if your town has a band shell and there truly is a community band, like these forms are really kind of something of the past. Like I think most students, if they're not in band, aren't going to sit and be able to identify the timbre of a trombone versus a trumpet versus a French horn, or what's an oboe, what's a bassoon, right? Like there's a cultural vocabulary that everyone used to have that's really evolved. And I don't find that our structures in music education have evolved with them. And I love the modern band movement. I mean, I love. I was at APME this past spring. I brought my student rock band, or the kids that could come, and it was really fun and amazing experience for them. But rock and roll music is 70 years old, and we're like patting ourselves on the back at that the state music education associations are like letting them in. You know what I mean? And so I just find that, as I try to really hone what it is that I've built and what it is that keeps me building, it's really about authentically locating the ensemble within the life of the community that it's serving. So in our school, of course, we have all these kids that play guitar, and of course, we want to give them something to do that might, is going to help grow them as musicians. Um, I know schools have wonderful guitar ensemble programs, and I'm not saying that that's not awesome. It's just that in our school, with our size, it doesn't really make sense to have like a bunch of little chamber groups. I think that the full group experience still, to me, is very meaningful. And so by arranging all the music that they play, I've been able to kind of give what I hope is a slightly more authentic experience. We've had students from China in our school for many years, and there was a couple of years where we had a student that played the erhu. They already mentioned the accordion. I've had a couple kids that played accordion. Only one of them joined the ensemble, but that was an amazing phase of arranging. We had a harpist for a while, and now since I always have I can take up to 5 pianists. I'll always have someone on a synth with a harp sound, and those kinds of choices to help bring everyone into a satisfying whole in ways that are hopefully authentic to what they want to be doing.
So if someone wants to try something tomorrow, where is that starting point for like finding what your community needs, or what I don't know, where would you start for someone else?
I mean, it's a hard question. Like, if I were plopped into any band room USA, what would I do? I mean, I do think there's something awesome about letting kids choose where they sit. And obviously, from a performance standpoint, you're going to want to have people in like instrument sections for some things, but maybe not for everything. So, if I wanted to try something tomorrow, I might say choose your own seat today. And we're going to rehearse as usual, but you're going to be sitting either next to your friend that you want to sit next to, or next to this instrument that you're curious about what they play. I encourage every single solitary ensemble director to arrange music for the students, perhaps drawn from what they have told you they want to do. So it's a little bit of a dance. I use a lot of Google Forms for reflection, and I'll ask kids what kinds of pieces they want to play. And sometimes kids will, of course, as you can imagine, come running up to me like, "Can we play this song?" And the answer is not just like, "Yeah," because, you have to figure out something that you can tolerate in your own ears, that they're into, that will work. I mean, I see my expertise as figuring out what we can do successfully and then arranging the parts so that we do. So, we've done, some Imagine Dragons songs over the years, and kids are like, psyched to play stuff they've heard from the radio. Is this the song that got the most votes? Maybe not, but at least, I'm sort of hitting them in the genre and in the general kind of neighborhood of where their ears are. And I find that a lot of kids want to play what they listen to. And a lot of band repertoire does not necessarily cut it. So, I mean, I'm really following the sort of authenticity argument with the popular music crowd. Like, is it authentic to be in a middle school orchestra and play a Coldplay song? Not if you want to be in Coldplay as an adult, but do you have an authentic learning experience as a 12-year-old playing a Coldplay song and playing crap out of it with your friends and sounding amazing in this huge group setting? Like, yeah, I think that leaves a lasting musical impression that might embolden you to do something musically as you look back on it, as that experience is farther and farther in your past. So I would say that reflection is a great activity, and you both know all about it. But asking students to reflect on what it is that they want to learn and what kind of music it is they want to play, and what are the ways in which they work best, and what are the challenges that they mostly face, and what are they interested in maybe focusing their efforts on, and then sort of drawing from that information something that kind of is generally in the target zone of what they've asked to do and what you think they quote unquote should do. Reflection at the beginning of the year, reflection mid-process, reflection when the process has ended. I I think arranging for the students in the room is an incredibly important thing for teachers to try. Um, and so I would hope that everyone would at least try to do that.
Yeah. That sounds like it sounds like fun. I mean, everything you're describing sounds like a music room that is fun, and that's a good thing. So one thing that
We try to have fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, music has to be fun, right? That's why we do it.
Yeah.
It needs to be.
Yeah.
So last season, we really noticed that a lot of people were talking about building relationships with the students. And the various things that you've mentioned today, like even this idea of taking risks, right? Being able to try something new, talking about reflection. So obviously, from what I can hear, relationships are important to you as well. Do you have any like go-to methods that you use to build these relationships, or just what have you have found works over the years?
I mean, I think it's hard for me to answer that question because working in a Quaker school, like those relationships are really part of the school culture in a very explicit way. And an example of that is like once a week, we all go to the meeting house, which is a very spare kind of room where you sit on plain wooden benches. Everyone kind of sits and you sit in silence. And that's called meeting for worship. It's a Quaker church or Quaker temple. So the fact that I'm part of a school community where we will all stop what we are doing, walk into a very empty room and sit in silence together for 30 or 40 minutes once a week, I think already sets the relationship at a certain place where, we are really, we are a values-based school, we're a mission-based school. And so the mission is alive and it's known, it's made visible. I am really quick to offer my time to my students. And I am very sure to do the things I say I will do. So that if there's a study hall period in the middle school and I invite a student down for help that day and they don't show up, I go find them and make sure that they know that like, I'm here, let's do this thing. That's going to be awesome. And I try really carefully to be extremely encouraging. If a student is struggling with a part, I don't say, well, you can't play this part yet, let me help you. I say something more like, I'd love to practice this part with you. My favorite thing to do is learning music with students. I have some ideas for how you might gain some traction here. Do you want to come down and work on that with me? So really keeping everything in terms of a growth mindset, like in terms of the way I speak about things that aren't quote unquote working or happening. I pay attention to the sports teams at my school and I root for them in my classroom because I have a lot of students in my room that are really into their sports teams. And the athletic director and I have a wonderful relationship. We work together and there's never been a conflict we could not quickly and without a lot of drama sort out. We share a lot of students. Again, that's a small school phenomenon. And I just want the students to know that I see more than what they show me in the classroom together. I have noticed that merch does something super special, like t-shirts are magic. Like we do an annual t-shirt and the kids wear them. Like I'm looking at kids who are wearing the shirt from 2 years ago and just like creating this sense within the school community, like we're all wearing this shirt because we're all part of this other team. It's not my sports team, it's my music team. And so like the shirt's a big deal every year. And then I just try to assume the very best in every kid. And I think the pandemic school reality helped underline for all of us how important that is, that we are all trying our best and we are all, showing up how we show up. And I just try to assume that everyone is there with the very best of intentions. And if something comes out, if somebody says something in a way that isn't perfect, like they just, that's just where they are today. And I really try to assume the best in all of my students and give them the benefit of the doubt pretty much at all times. I'm not big on late penalties. And as the pandemic is, changing, I know there's some pressure to get back to late penalties. And I can't imagine myself getting back to severe late penalties because I know too many academics who turn their papers in very, very, very late with no, real recourse. And I want the kids to learn the thing and to do the thing. And if they're having trouble with those two tasks, I want to support them and I want to be in dialogue with them in a way that does not make them scared and run away. I want to make sure that they know, like, you can tell me what's happening and what's doable at this point.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I would say is often there are kids who say, can I play this instead of that in a part that I've written? And whereas at first I worked so hard on these arrangements, it was something new, and I was like, oh, now I'm like, well, let me hear it. What do we think? What do you guys think? Folks, what do you think? Yeah, yeah, that works. Yeah, sure. And like when students bring a creative idea to something that they're playing in class, like I try very hard to accept it or make it work in a way that is fun for them, because for them to be, again, bringing a generative spirit to what we're doing in the process of rehearsal, I think is just absolutely awesome. And I want to see as much of that as I can.
Yeah.
So, how can people connect with you, Heather, and learn more about your work?
Oh, yeah, awesome. So I have an Instagram, a music teacher Instagram at Notes by Heather, and I'm also using that handle on Twitter. And I have a website, notesbyheather.com. I'm supposed to be presenting this November for the NAFME conference, and I'll be there in person if anyone else is attending there. And really kind of digging more into like the how of arranging for pedagogy is the title of the session. And so kind of showing different arrangements, looking at some techniques for anyone that wants to start arranging and might want some just sort of some clarity. And I'm part of the F flat author community, which is a really vibrant, wonderful community of all kinds of smart and talented people doing things differently. And I'm thrilled to be a part of that world as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about your book through F flat?
Sure, yeah. So I was really thrilled when I came upon the title Breaking Band, because I really have always sort of said, like, I'm not a band director, and I don't feel like a band director. And I think that's probably informed by the many band directors that I studied under. But the book is, it's a philosophical underpinning for sort of the way that I've arrived at teaching secondary school instrumental music. I see it mostly as a permission structure. So that folks who might sense that things could go better in their classroom, but they don't quite know how to get out from under the thumb of the structures that we're often given no choice over. Just a permission structure to kind of think a little differently, to try some things, to take a more experimental tack. And then there are some queries for reflection. I really question the role of competition in music education. It's a funny thing to question, since obviously to become a professional flutist, I have won a lot of competition and I have done well in a lot of competitive environments, and I understand that has formed me, and I don't discount that. But I feel like, unfortunately, we really overemphasize competition in the way we do music education in most of our secondary schools, from ranked seating to festival scores being the end all be all of if a program is quote unquote successful, to how our professional status kind of is lived in the real world. And so I really push for folks to consider how removing competition might enliven their teaching and serve their students. I am not a tech savvy person necessarily, but I have embraced technology as fully as I can in my teaching. And I'm just finishing up an Ableton Live course. Like, I'm getting a lot of energy from learning more about music technology. And when I think of, it's kind of a different topic, but I teach some general music. As the department chair, I oversee some general music classes in our middle school, and in particular, like giving every kid sound trap and telling them, like, yeah, we're going to do these assignments in class, but this is yours to play with for fun whenever you want to. Their eyes get big. And again, that's sort of like technology has allowed us from when I was in school to now to like return this generative act to students. You don't have to build a ton of expertise to go make stuff. You could just go make stuff. And so sort of singing the praises of that, of the ways in which technology can really, enhance what it is that we're trying to do. And so the book is a little bit of philosophy, a little bit practical, and hopefully just some food for thought. I do recognize, like, being in a private school, being in a small school, being in a Quaker school, and coming into a place where there was no existing program really to speak of. Like, I was given this tremendous opportunity to build, and I think that a lot of schools might build different things than they currently have if they were given the same opportunity. So sort of finding those cracks, like if all of it sounds great and you're just in a school that has a structure and that's that, like starting a club. Let's have Friday afternoon music club. And whoever shows up to this club, we are going to figure out, we're going to put on a show. We're going to put the date on the calendar. We're going to get that gig booked. And then we're going to figure out what to do on the show. And like, that's just much more aligned with what real world music making is. Yeah. And I would love to see that in more of our schools, to be a little bit more grounded in the real world and a little bit less attached to the structures that we've had for so long that we don't really question them.
Yeah. And that's exactly why we wanted to talk to you today, because of all of those things. I think it's so important that we can think that way, because it does benefit the kids, right? It's what's going to help these students continue to be musicians when they leave us. And that's the goal.
That's it. I mean, it should not be that you only get to play music when you're a school student. It should be that you have access to this for the entirety of your life in different forms throughout your life. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
I'm like,
no, you're great.
It's my pleasure. I hope I'm not rambling too much.
No, this is exactly what we were hoping for. We absolutely love the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for asking me. I truly appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.